Actually, it is a growing hole in the ozone layer.
Nobody predicted this. It's like a bomb falling out of the sky.
Could pose a threat to all life on the planet.
This is our only planet, and that we are playing a very dangerous game with change that could be catastrophic.
In the risky game, the world has been playing with its own future.
No one really knows what goes on where the sun meets the stratosphere.
The late 20th century was defined by an incredibly tense international climate that made agreement on anything nearly impossible. However, when faced with an insurmountable global threat, the nations of the world stepped up and worked together to find a solution. Established in 1987, the Montreal Protocol is the most successful environmental treaty in history, revolutionizing the concept of environmental rights and the responsibilities that they hold to protect the planet. In an era of chaos and uncertainty, the Montreal Protocol stands as a beacon of hope for the people of planet Earth.
Real, and what's wonderful about this, and doesn't often happen in the world, is people said, if we let this problem persist, it's going to get worse and worse and worse. It's not a crisis now, but it's going to be.
In the mid-20th century, a class of chemicals known as chlorofluorocarbons, or CFCs, became a widely used alternative to toxic refrigerants such as ammonia and methyl chloride. Over the next couple decades, global CFC consumption quickly rose to around 1.1 million tons annually.
Later, in the 1970s, Frank Sherwood Rowland and Mario Molina began to study the impacts of CFCs on the Earth. They discovered that the molecules would remain in the atmosphere for a long time, resulting in significant damage. Large companies, however, disputed this hypothesis, and many people were speculative for political and economic reasons.
But accumulation of CFCs was a very real problem, impacting the strength of Earth's ozone layer, which protects all life on the planet by absorbing radiation. Although no one yet knew quite how this buildup would present itself, the answer would soon become startlingly evident.
In the 1950s, the British Antarctic Survey began measuring ozone concentrations above Antarctica. Shockingly, in 1985, scientists Joe Farman, Brian Gardner, and John Shanklin reported a 30% drop in ozone levels above the continent due to large concentrations of chlorine monoxide. The affected area was over 7 million square miles. Further studies only supported this alarming observation.
In 1986, Susan Solomon led a team to Antarctica to search for an explanation, confirming the hypothesis that this void was the direct result of CFC usage in the industrialized world. This monumental moment raised awareness of the dangers of these chemicals and sparked the demand for change and collaboration internationally.
The ozone hole, more than perhaps any other environmental issue, showed that the collective actions of humans could damage something as valuable as the ozone layer on the scale of the planet.
However, it wasn't as simple as abandoning the use of CFCs. In the 1980s, the chemicals could be found almost everywhere, from air conditioning to military technology.
Lack of widespread information surrounding the anomaly also made it difficult to agree upon any specific action, with many not understanding the urgency of the situation. International tensions escalated by the Cold War made it difficult for countries to cooperate.
And there was no Cold War between the scientists from Russia and the scientists from the US or anybody else.
Eventually, compromises were made. In 1987, the US Senate unanimously approved ratification of the agreement. The vast majority of environmental advocates and large industries also voiced support.
As with any other treaty, writing, revising, and even ratification was a long and difficult road. However, in the case of ozone depletion in the 1980s, governments around the world were finally convinced by scientists that the problem was not only real, but also immensely important. 2 years after its signing on September 15, 1987, the Montreal Protocol entered into force.
The Montreal Protocol has the responsibility to protect the ozone layer.
The primary focus of the Montreal Protocol was dictating a schedule for the phasing out of CFCs. Notably, it communicated the writers' hopes of cutting CFC production in half by the new millennium, which was startlingly fast for this sort of environmental action.
The treaty allowed each country to develop its own economically feasible way to limit its emissions of ozone-depleting substances, or ODSs. Now, the manufacture of CFCs is banned in most industrialized countries, with large companies also supporting the transition. After observing the success of the initial signatory countries of reducing CFC usage, additional countries joined in. By 2015, all UN member states had ratified and enforced the protocol, making the Montreal Protocol the first and only treaty in the history of the United Nations to achieve universal ratification.
While the Montreal Protocol still faced some problems with implementation, such as the rise of an international black market for CFCs, it was certainly working. Since its signing, the treaty has been amended 9 times to further reduce and eventually completely phase out CFCs. Through these changes, it has proved that it can adapt and strengthen its provisions to uphold the responsibility to protect the planet against over 100 hazardous chemicals.
The Montreal Protocol is widely regarded as the most successful global environmental treaty of all time, with little controversy or pushback since its establishment. By 2006, the parties had already phased out 95% of ODSs. In fact, had the world not come together to ban CFCs in the 1980s, we would now find ourselves on the brink of massive ozone depletion.
According to Susan Solomon herself, by 2050, it's pretty well established we would have had ozone hole-like conditions over the whole planet, and the planet would have become uninhabitable. Climate projections indicate that the ozone layer will be fully restored to 1980 levels between 2040 and 2066, but the future is not without risks.
Today, the world finds itself stalled on another global environmental crisis, climate change. With large companies spreading misinformation, the public confused and divided, it's clear that we have once again found ourselves in a situation which mirrors that of the 1980s. But this problem is much harder to solve, and ongoing international tensions make cooperation that much more difficult.
However, amid all this uncertainty, we can find hope in the Montreal Protocol. Its regulation of ODSs has done more for global warming than other treaties, such as the Kyoto Protocol, designed for that purpose, with scientists going as far as to say that the recovery of the ozone layer will prevent an additional 1 degree of warming by the end of the century.
The creation of the ozone hole showed how rapidly we can change our planetary environment for the worse, says John Shanklin. Climate change is a bigger problem, to be fair, but that doesn't absolve the politicians of responsibility for making the necessary decisions.
I think we shouldn't give up. We have to keep trying and telling the politicians what's needed and trying to find scientific solutions.
In 2010 alone, the reduction of ODSs in the atmosphere prevented more than 160,000 cases of premature mortality, 130,000 heart attacks, 1.7 million asthma attacks, and millions of cases of skin cancer.
One of the things that clearly increases the incidence of melanoma is UV irradiation.
Between 1970 and 2022, the US observed a 78% drop in total emissions of the 6 major air pollutants, despite increases in GDP, vehicle miles traveled, and population size during the same time frame.
The impacts of the Montreal Protocol are incredibly clear. It showed the world that it is our responsibility to come together to preserve the rights of the environment. Not only has it improved the economy and global environmental and human health, it very well did save the world.
Since it was signed in 1987, the Montreal Protocol has been hailed as the most successful environmental treaty of all time. It represents the shared global responsibility to protect the planet we all live on and has revolutionized the concept of environmental rights. In addition to inspiring other treaties, the protocol is constantly adapting to include a wider variety of ozone-depleting substances.
Unlike most other regulations, it was widely supported by the public, raising awareness about the very real impact of human activities on the environment. Its existence, despite immense political tensions and conflicting motivations, stands as a symbol of hope for the future of Earth, the cooperation exhibited by the world's nations serving as a model for the new generation tackling climate change. While in the 1980s, the Montreal Protocol saved the world from ozone depletion, in the future it will undoubtedly do so again by showing that we can overcome division in the face of an environmental crisis.
These nations could say, we have a right to manufacture and emit any compound we want. On the other hand, there are consequences to exercising that right.